Officials from the U.S. and China sharply criticized each other's policies during a meeting yesterday. Secretary of State Tony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan met face-to-face for the very first time with high-level Chinese diplomats in Anchorage, Alaska. The heated opening remarks lasted more than an hour, and each side offered rebuttals for their counterparts' speeches. So to break this all down, I want to bring in Gordon Chang. He's the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S. China Tech War. Thank you so much for joining us, Gordon. So this meeting of the minds amongst diplomats started off with some very undiplomatic language. What do you suppose was the strategy for both sides during this public back and forth?
Well, China rolled into Anchorage not with the intent of having meaningful discussions with the U.S. That was clear from the opening statements. They came there to dictate the terms of the relationship going forward. And the Chinese basically were saying, we're not going to be bound by rules. Got to remember, Anne-Marie, each side was limited to 4 minutes of opening statements. U.S. took 4 minutes and 44 seconds. China took 20 minutes, 23 seconds. And that's just an indication that the Chinese were not going to be bound by any sense of diplomatic protocol or bound by understandings with the U.S. It shows the arrogance of the Chinese side. And that was going to have broader implications, not just for this meeting, but I think for the years going forward.
So I want to give people a sense of what happened and what was said. Both sides really criticized the other over human rights. I want to play some of the sound from Secretary Blinken and his Chinese counterpart, who spoke in Mandarin. So what you're going to hear is the voice of an interpreter.
We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability.
The challenges facing the United States in human rights are deep-seated. They did not just emerge over the past 4 years, such as Black Lives Matter. It did not come up only recently. So we do hope that for our two countries, it's important that we manage our respective affairs well.
So they're speaking very politely, but you know, from the U.S. side, they really called on accountability for China when it comes to what's happening in Hong Kong and the fight for democracy there. On China's part, as you heard, the mention of Black Lives Matter and accusing the U.S. of violating the rights of African Americans. Why has human rights become a significant issue, drawing focus from both sides?
I think it's because China is very sensitive about what's going on. In what the Chinese call Xinjiang, which is the northwestern part of their country, China's been committing genocide and other crimes against humanity, including forced rape, forced slavery, organ harvesting. We know that Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and others are dying in those concentration camps, which house at least 1.1 million people. This is horrific. And China wants to distract the conversation around the world. So that's why you heard those statements from Yang Jiechi.
I also want to play some sound from Secretary Blinken describing his view of the U.S. and China relationship.
I said that the United States relationship with China will be competitive where it should be, collaborative where it can be, adversarial where it must be.
So this was the first face-to-face meeting of high-level officials from both sides during the Biden administration. What does the outcome tell you about the future of this relationship over the next 4 years?
This is going to be extremely difficult, and at times it's probably going to be ugly. Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, in end of last year, gave a speech where he said, "The East is rising, the West is declining." And Xi Jinping talked about chaos on American streets, which, by the way, China has been inciting. I think really what you've got here is a Chinese elite that believes that it can push the United States around. We have heard voices from Beijing, especially in November, about how they believe that they own the Biden administration because of Wall Street and Hunter Biden. So this is a time where the Chinese attitude can cause great tumult in the world. And this is just one of those most dangerous periods, I think, that we have gone through, because largely the Chinese believe, and I believe that they're wrong, but the Chinese do believe that they can do what they want. And we know some of the things they want to break apart their neighbors. They want to start wars. They want to do all sorts of things, which clearly is just not acceptable.
Gordon Chang, I hope we can have you on. This is sort of the opening discussion, if you will. But we know that the U.S. and China, it's a very complicated relationship. We're talking about two economic powers that are both adversarial, but in many areas have to cooperate. So I hope we can continue this conversation. Gordon Chang, thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne Marie.